LinkedIn News.
It's not about being wise or having all the answers or about being well-schooled in every different area of life, from family to friendship to finances to work. It's about being able to look at a letter and see exactly what is the person asking, what are they saying between the lines that they're not asking, what would be a realistic thing for them to do, and how are they going to react to the advice that you actually give them. So I really, really try to give advice that is realistically actionable for the letter writer based on what I know about them. It's easy to tell everyone, and I do this sometimes, break up with him, leave the job, stop talking to your mom. But I always make sure to ask myself, having read this letter, having picked up all the feelings and emotions from this letter, what would actually be helpful to this person? What advice might they actually use?
So that's Jenee Desmond-Harris. I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better. Make sure you hit that follow button to get new episodes of our podcasts every week. Our conversation starts in just a few moments. Hey everyone. From LinkedIn News, I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better, a self-improvement podcast where every week I sit down with some of the world's brightest minds and bravest hearts to learn how we can improve ourselves, our relationship to others, and the world around us. If you want to join us and get applicable ways to shift your mindset and improve your well-being, you can do so by heading over to www.linkedin.com/everydaybetter. That is www.linkedin.com/everydaybetter. I would be honored to jump into your inbox and share strategies for choosing to be a little bit better every day. This month is Black History Month, so we're dedicating it to Black voices who inspire excellence. In this 4-part series, you're going to hear 4 women who are coming with honest stories, guidance, and as advocates for you to chase your own version of excellence in your field. This week, I'm talking to Jenee Desmond-Harris, the writer behind Slate's popular Dear Prudence advice column. Jenee didn't start off doing this work. In fact, she was a lawyer, but she felt the spark was missing. A moment with a colleague saying they'd want to study law for the rest of their lives made her realize this job was not for her. So she spent the next year taking a bet on herself and transformed into a writer. Years later, she's contributed to and worked full-time for multiple publications and now has the coveted job of advice columnist. Her story offers some really incredible advice on deciding what you want, working around barriers, taking a bet on yourself, and surrounding yourself with the right people. Here's Jenee.
I spent a lot of time as a child, as a young person, as a student, thinking about the careers that I might have. And I'm in a career now that I never could have imagined. I ended up going to law school and becoming a lawyer. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I would end up being an advice columnist, because I don't think anyone who's not some kind of weird narcissist thinks what I should really be doing is telling everyone else how to live their life, right? I did go to law school. I graduated. I practiced at a big firm in DC for about 3.5, 4 years. Like many young attorneys, I was there because it seemed like the responsible thing to do, and it seemed like a path toward being financially stable, and it was. I did not enjoy it in the least. I had a very challenging few years where I did very little other than work. I did learn a lot and I did meet a lot of great people, but I knew I could not be there. So I started doing a bit of freelance writing. I found a wonderful mentor, Lanae O'Neill Parker, who was a reporter for the Washington Post and a published author. And she was kind enough to take me under her wing and help me get some of my first personal essays published. They ran at theroot.com, which was an African-American news and commentary site. I ended up deciding, once I had a little bit of traction with my freelance writing, to take a year away from practicing law and just see where I could go with it. At the end of that year, I was offered a staff position at The Root, and from there I became an editor. From there I ended up going to Vox.com. From Vox.com, I did a journalism fellowship at Stanford. Ended up working at the New York Times in the opinion section as an editor, which was a really, really great job. And then I got the call that really, really surprised me that Slate was looking for a new Dear Prudence. I was a huge fan of Danny, the Prudie before me, and I actually used to love to listen to the podcast and press pause and think, "How would I answer this?" before he gave his answer. So I was invested, I was into it.
That's cool.
So, of course, I did the writing sample and put my name in the hat. I remember saying to one of my friends, actually, coincidentally, the woman who was my manager at The Root and then at Vox, "I just don't know if I can take this job because what will I do next? How can I ever have another serious job in journalism after I spend all this time responding to people's silly questions about what to do when your neighbor is putting his dog's poop in your trash can?" And she said, "Well, what other job in journalism do you want?" And I realized I really couldn't answer that. I'd had what I thought was the best one for me, and I'd done it for a while, and I decided when I got the offer to take the leap and do it, and it's been the most fun I've ever had in my professional life. So rewarding, and I just feel incredibly, incredibly lucky to be doing it every day.
Wow. I mean, you put the story together very succinctly, but at the same time, you go, wow, this person was a lawyer and then moved into kind of taking a bet on yourself and deciding to write and then it returning in the way that most people would hope it returned, which is in a job. I feel like you had this inflection point people talk about where I wonder if it was more for you that you were like, I can't keep doing this legal thing, or if you were like, I have to go try writing.
I think it was a combination. I knew that writing was the thing that always came naturally to me and that I was naturally good at. I also knew that I was an okay lawyer, but I didn't love it. And I looked around me and saw that the people who were really good were the people who wanted to read about it in their free time and whose eyes lit up talking to the partners about their work over lunch. And I remember looking at one of my colleagues saying, "Congratulations, Tim, you made partner. You were always such a nice guy. That's amazing." I could see that he loved it. I could see that he was energized by it. And I thought to myself, this is such a competitive field. I will never be able to compete with someone who has that kind of love for it when I don't. I'll never be the best. It'll always be a struggle. I also remember going on a work trip to Tokyo with a partner I was working for and chatting with him over dinner about his plans for his upcoming retirement. And he said, "I have to find a way to keep practicing law. I want to keep doing it. I'll do something. I love it." And I thought to myself, that's so great for him. I know I won't be 65 years old looking for extra ways to practice law when this is all over. So I do get a lot of praise for making this quote unquote brave leap to journalism. And it was brave because I was at a very uncertain time for the industry. I think what has been my superpower in my career transition is I just have this deep belief that I deserve to be happy. I just really think I do. And that's helped me in relationships, in friendships, in jobs. If I'm not happy and I'm not being treated well, something in me just says, get out of there. And I can't resist it. I attribute it to the way I was raised by my mom. And one story I always think about is in 7th grade, I went to a middle school that had one set of classes upstairs and then another class downstairs. I was placed downstairs and had no classes with my friends. And I was so upset about it. I was a shy child. I felt really lonely. I felt like I was going to have a miserable year. And my mom went down to the counselor's office and said, "My daughter's a great student. She's a great kid. I want you to move her to classes with her friends." Now, I know a reaction to that could be, wow, she was really coddling you. Wow, you were spoiled. But the truth is, my mom did not have a ton of money and could not do a lot of things for me that my friends had, but she really believed I deserved to be happy. And she advocated me to get moved to a classroom where I would be happy. And I think those kind of lessons really stuck with me and have really shaped a lot of my decisions along the way.
I mean, applaud your mom for that. And it also taught you probably to advocate for yourself instead of suck it up and deal with it, which is another way to get through things. You know, I mentioned I study positive psychology, which isn't just about pretending things are good, or it's also how do you create the conditions for thriving? And so I hear in that too that whether she knew it or not, she was like, I'm going to create the conditions for my daughter to have an amazing year because she's an amazing student and deserves that
Yeah.
environment.
And this is one thing I can do for her. We're not
Yeah.
going to go on vacation to Europe. She's not gonna have all the most expensive clothes, but I can get her into a room where she's gonna feel good.
So, okay, you mentioned, what am I going to do after this job? Because I
Mhm.
want to be taken seriously as a journalist. And then having the moment where you realize, wait a second, there's nothing else I do want to do. Tell me what it's been like to own this column and what skill sets you've brought into it that have made you excellent in it that maybe you didn't expect to be using.
Yeah, it's one of those jobs where you really don't wanna overthink. "Why am I doing this? Who qualifies me to give advice?" It's absolutely a role where imposter syndrome can almost justifiably pop up for you. It's natural for people to ask. I'm almost always asked in interviews, "What makes you qualified?" And I like the previous Prudie's answer, Danny. He used to say, "You're qualified to give advice if someone asked."
Ooh,
So that's a good one.
that closes that
But
door. Yeah.
but another thing I think about is what makes a good advice columnist, and is a quality that I have, is being a really good reader and observer and being really perceptive. It's not about being wise or having all the answers or about being well schooled in every different area of life, from family to friendship to finances to work. It's about being able to look at a letter and see exactly what is the person asking, what are they saying between the lines that they're not asking, what would be a realistic thing for them to do, and how are they going to react to the advice that you actually give them. So I really, really try to give advice that is realistically actionable for the letter writer based on what I know about them. It's easy to tell everyone, and I do this sometimes, break up with him, leave the job, stop talking to your mom. But I always make sure to ask myself, having read this letter, having picked up all the feelings and emotions from this letter, what would actually be helpful to this person? What advice might they actually use?
I read one, by the way, that was recent that was about this girl who's in a relationship, and he said something about her body.
Yes.
And you were like, here is what I think you should do, starting with, I'll give him a pass for a second, but if not, if he
Yeah.
doesn't do this right, you do need to break up with
Yeah. So often it's
him.
give them another chance, do this experiment. And sometimes I'll tell someone who's clearly just so far from that place I talked about that is believing you deserve to be happy. I'll say for a couple of months, just keep a journal about how you want to feel and how you actually feel every day in this relationship. Talk to 5 friends about what they see in terms of what you're going through. Imagine how you would like to feel and how that might look, and take one tiny step each day to get closer to that. There are times you've got to leave this person if there's a physical danger or if I'm really worried about them. But I try to put myself in the letter writer's shoes based on what I know about them. And again, I really try to be realistic.
What's it like to have all of this power? I love the comment of, if someone's asking for advice, then I'm qualified to give it. At the same time, someone might write to you, and I'm sure they do. They write to you, they see your response, and they might make a decision based on what you have to say. What's that like for you? And do you interact with people after they've made the decision?
Once in a while, I'll get a response from someone who says, "I took your advice and thank you." Let's be honest, we all know what the internet is like. The more common response I'm getting is, "You're a dummy. You were wrong. Here's what the real answer
Forget those
is."
people. Right, right.
Right. But I can sometimes get into the mode of writing for the Slate audience instead of writing for the actual person who's asked for advice, and I really have to check myself on that. And I am reminded when I hear from real people that someone's perceiving this and taking it seriously. I have the hardest time when it's a child or a young person writing in, especially when I feel that they may be stuck in a situation with parents who are mistreating them, parents who aren't taking their needs seriously, a situation where they're not getting everything they need. I feel the greatest burden there to give advice that will actually be helpful. And those are probably the letters where I'm least satisfied. And I wish I didn't have this power. I wish someone else could fix the situation for them.
Yeah, I'm wondering how you boundary yourself to not take on what so many people are doing. Do you have advice for that? I mean, a lot of us are giving advice, whether we write columns or not. And it's hard sometimes to really separate yourself, especially when you feel empathy from the experience someone else is having. How do you do that?
There have been some situations. There's one I can think of in particular with a 13-year-old who was actually being abused at home, where it wasn't enough to write back to the kid and say, "You'll get through this, find a supportive adult." And my boss and my boss's boss ended up on the phone with a counselor from that child's school and some other adults based on some detective work. So there are cases where we won't even publish the letter, and I may send resources or something that treats it as the serious problem it is rather than entertainment. Let's be honest, I am mostly writing the responses for entertainment and insight for a million people who are not the letter writer.
Yeah. Well, and you pick the story because of that. Like, it's fun things that you're like, oh, I wouldn't have expected.
Yeah.
You mentioned you love psychology, so I'm curious, like from a skill set perspective, what is it that you're sort of putting into place that maybe is connected back to psychology, or are you bringing in concepts and things like that? Or are you typically using your own real life, I'm a human, you're a human experience?
So I have no expertise in psychology, so I really can't say I'm bringing research or data or anything like that. An advice columnist who I really admire is Cheryl Strayed, and she uses a term from psychology to describe how she relates to her letter writers, and she says she holds them all in unconditional positive regard. She tries not to be judgmental of them. She tries to see the best in them and want the best for them. I would say I do that too, 89% of the time. I allow myself those few instances where I say, "Okay, you're being horrible." I'm actually more concerned about improving the lives of the people around you than I am about making you improve and get better. And then, of course, I'm always telling people to go to therapy. I believe in therapy. I often bring in concepts that my own therapist introduces to me. I've been talking to my therapist this year about the idea of being conflict averse. And she's shared with me that if you don't have conflict, you can't really have intimacy with your friend, family member, or loved one. And since that's been on my mind, I've been sort of popping that into columns where it comes up.
We're taking a quick break. We'll be right back with Jenee Desmond-Harris. And we're back with Jenee Desmond-Harris. So when you think about like the stories that have really shaped you writing this column, are there any that come to mind?
I answer close to 30 letters a week. There are some that I remember mostly because of the reader responses to them. So I had one letter from a woman who had adopted a child who was a relative. The child's parents had passed away. She was not really in a financial position to take care of this kid, but she was doing it anyway. She had a bedroom set for the child. And I can't remember the detail, but there was some family dispute over the bedroom set. Someone else was claiming that it was theirs and they should get it. And it looked like she might have to part with it. I remember I heard from dozens of readers offering to buy this kid a bedroom set. And I was just so moved by that. And I actually ended up putting her in touch with some of them. So that one really stands out in my mind.
What did that teach you or like make you feel?
I think it gave me a reminder that I need to remind people that they're not alone and that there are a lot of people who would love to help them if they can be vulnerable enough to share their story.
Which is, I think we need a lot of that right now.
Yeah, and asking for help is okay. Definitely. Another letter that I remember because of the response was from a person who was really complaining about their friend who suffered from depression and some mental health issues and was really negative all the time. And the letter writer just felt extremely put upon by all these conversations with this person who was going through a tough time and almost thought about pulling back from the friendship. And in my response, I really pushed back on that and kind of said, this is what being a friend is. This person isn't doing anything to you. This person isn't doing anything wrong. This person is having a hard time. There are ebbs and flows in all of our lives and in friendships. Sometimes we are the burden. Sometimes someone else is the burden. And it's okay. Like, give this person a little bit of grace. They deserve your support. Try to find a way to be more empathetic and less annoyed. And I heard from a lot of readers after that saying, thank you for saying that because I'm the depressed friend. I'm the one who worries so much about feeling like a burden. And it was so good to hear that I shouldn't be seen that way.
Yeah, it's like sometimes you're the hammer, sometimes you're the nail. They say, and you
Yeah.
kind of just go back and forth between that.
Yeah. And yeah, I find myself mentioning a lot, especially in letters about friendship, that it shifts over time, especially after college and after your early 20s. People are going to start getting married. They're also going to get divorced. People are going to start having kids. They're also going to have miscarriages. They're also going to have kids with challenges and special needs. People will get great jobs, people will be unemployed, people's parents will get sick, people's parents will pass away. I think in a good, long, healthy friendship, you need to be comfortable with the ebbs and flows and many instances of switching roles.
Actually, I'm curious. You've been doing this for over 2 years. How have you evolved in this?
That's a really good question. I like to think I've become more empathetic. In the beginning, it was a challenge, and my editor at the time, who's no longer at Slate, often had to tell me, "Could you soften that a little?" I think I could be a little snappy with people, but actually, the more stories I hear from different perspectives, the more empathetic I actually do feel.
Yeah, it's gotta be, like, broadening your understanding of what it's like to be a human.
Definitely.
Yeah. I loved your point earlier around making this career pivot and this idea of seeing these 2 people whose eyes lit up when they talked about being lawyers, and the fact that they wanted to pull this through even maybe beyond retirement age because they love doing this in their spare time. And I think that's something that we sometimes over romanticize. So it's like, I'm supposed to be happy all the time in my job, which we all know is just not true. You're going to have moments where you're stressed and all these other things. But I love that as maybe a guidepost for direction of career or direction of work or focus. Is that for you how you think about excellence?
Absolutely. I know that, as I said, I'm never going to be really excellent at something I don't love. And I know that it's really a privilege to even think that way because there are plenty of people in the world, I would say the vast majority, who need to do a job that they don't completely love to make money, be comfortable, and support their family. And I think that's a different kind of passion. Sometimes I can put myself in the headspace of maybe I could have been a lawyer. Maybe I could have just found an in-house position that was a little less demanding and just enjoyed my life on the evenings and on the weekends. That's a perfectly legitimate way to live. It's perfectly legitimate for the thing you're excited about to be stability, to be providing opportunities to your children, to be taking care of your parents. I feel really, really lucky that I get to feel like myself all day long at work. I'm exactly the same person when I'm writing a column that I am when I'm texting my friends.
Being you. Yeah. And that's what excellence looks like.
Yeah.
Has there been anything specific that you feel like you've experienced as a Black woman in this industry or even at your current company?
I think I've been really lucky, and I think about this a lot in journalism for a few reasons, in that I haven't had to personally battle a lot of discrimination or racism. So, reason number one, light skinned biracial privilege. That's a real thing. I'm sure you know the studies out there in psychology that show that people think that Black and Hispanic people who have lighter complexions are better and smarter. My parents told me I was Black growing up. I went to a Black college. My husband is Black. My son is Black. My friends are Black. I'm in Black organizations. That doesn't mean that I'm having the same experience every day as someone who's constantly getting microaggressed and constantly getting looked at through the lens of bias and discrimination. So I think that's a big thing that I just have to acknowledge. Second, I went to Harvard Law School. People think if you went to Harvard Law School, you can do anything.
Mhm.
It's interesting because they don't teach anything except the practice of law. It's trade school.
Right.
I didn't learn anything about journalism, but there's that. And the other thing that I'm so lucky about is that, like I said before, my first 2 jobs in journalism were working for a Black woman. My first one was at a Black publication. So I think a lot of that has come together to really, really protect me from some of the, frankly, awful experiences that a lot of Black women have in this profession. What's been harder for me, and this is not so much in the current role as much as previous roles, is I have been disappointed and honestly hurt by the way some of my white colleagues think about race and racism. So when I'm around people who are really brilliant and really smart and can get their head around any subject, but when something about a story about race or racism comes up, it's like, I don't know, can you do it? I'm just not sure. Can you read it? Um, that makes me think you actually just don't care that much. And that actually hurts. There are also editorial moments when you learn that people think racism is harmless or okay. So when you hear people throwing around the word benign racism or excusing people who hold these views or mentioning people that they still really love who are racist, that hurts too. And in decisions about content, about angles, about framing, about reporting, this kind of stuff does come up. And I don't know if people are aware of how hurtful it can be to their Black colleagues when their views on race and racism are revealed in that way.
Right. And it's sort of pushed aside. Or even when you're in the role that you're in, right? So you've proven that it can be done. And so then while trying to be a model for other people who look like you also are then in some way discounting the experience of discrimination to white colleagues.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I guess in the actual substance of the column, the way it probably comes up is that I have a really low tolerance for people putting up with racist friends or family members. I'm always going to tell someone they're not a nice person who also has a slight difference with you on racism. They have different values. They're a bad person. I don't think you should have them in your life. Every single time I'll receive pushback on that, saying you're intolerant. This is why our world is divided. We need to accept everyone. I just know that's a view that's out there that I'm always going to push up against.
Well, yeah, I was recently hearing someone say something like nicest people ever, but, or like kindest
Yeah,
people you'll ever meet, except. And you're like, well, then they're not the kindest people you'll ever meet, are they?
right.
Right.
Absolutely. This is my long-standing pet peeve in journalism is all the pieces you read about how to get along with your family members despite political differences at Thanksgiving.
Right.
And I remember around the time of Ferguson, oh, if some of your relatives think that police violence against Black people is okay, here's how to talk about it respectfully to make sure that you two are still close. Something about the underlying message of that to me, that harmony between white people is more important than having decent and fair views about race that can make Black people live better lives in material ways, just really bothers me.
Yeah. It's like not allowing for real discourse and like honesty. Yeah, completely. When you think about people, if there's someone right now who's listening who may be where you were years ago, trying to chart a similar path or just in the field of journalism, what advice would you give them, particularly for Black women or people of color?
Speaking to someone who's currently practicing law and wanted to move into journalism, I would tell them to spend a couple of years saving as much money as you can. Because you can be great, you can be passionate, you can have all the right connections, and you're still probably going to make next to nothing in the beginning. And it doesn't matter how passionate you are about your work if you can't survive. So that's my really, really practical advice. My other advice is probably just to be as great as you can be at everything you do. So when you get your first job in the field that you think you want to be in that makes you really happy, no matter how small it is, try to do it as well as you can. So my first job at The Root was a freelance one where my job was essentially to aggregate and summarize, I think, about 8 news stories involving Black people, whether politicians, celebrities, people on TV, anything else, and just kind of write a couple paragraphs and put them on the website. Looking back, it was not that important. You know what I mean? It was not that important that this celebrity married that celebrity, or this person said that, or this person had a new song come out. But I took it so seriously. And I can just trace back my career and see how, even though I didn't know where I wanted to be and I didn't know where I would land, I tried to do everything really, really well. And I think that's what sort of propelled me from one step to the next.
Yeah. So mindset about not taking anything for granted and showing up.
Yeah.
And what would you say to someone who's like, I'm listening to this right now and I want to be the next Dear Prudence or the next Prudie? What advice would you give them?
So I actually gave someone advice on this recently, and she did implement it, and I think it's kind of working.
Mm,
There are only a few actual full-time advice columnist jobs. So I don't know if it makes sense to try to get in line for one of them. You probably don't want to bank on that. Social media is amazing. The incredible time about the moment we're living in is that you can reach and create an audience from wherever you are, no matter who you are. So my advice to the person who reached out to me wanting to start to do advice was just start doing it. Start doing it on Medium and tweet it out. Start doing it on Medium and create a TikTok account where you talk about it. That's absolutely something you can do. You may find your audience that way. If a real staff job does come up at one point, then you'll have your clips ready. The hardest thing, I think, is having a body of work to point to. And we're so lucky that in this day and age, you can create that body of work without anyone's permission.
yeah. And you don't have to be in the job to be creating the body of work. You have this whole other place where you could say, but I also have this.
Right.
Yeah.
And I will add that I got this job because of Twitter. I didn't get it because I worked at the New York Times behind the scenes, editing other people's words under their bylines. I got it because I was saying what I thought and what I felt on Twitter for free for no particular reason except that I wanted to say it. And that's what caught editors' attentions.
Wow. So you mentioned your mentor a number of years back, but when you think about the people in your life, the Black women and men who've inspired you to be excellent, who are they?
So the first woman I mentioned was, like I said, Lanae O'Neill Parker. She was a Washington Post reporter. She's now at Anscape. I mean, I was this lawyer who had no experience writing, and she was gracious enough to invite me over to her home on weekends to workshop my essays and sit next to her and eat dinner with her family.
Oh, wow.
And looking back, I just realized the incredible time commitment that was and how generous it was. And I still see her a couple times a week. Well, she's working on her book and I'm doing my writing, and we'll just be on Zoom together, just kind of keeping each other on track and accountable. She was in my wedding and she's a very close friend too. I mentioned the woman who brought me in at the Root, and then Vox is Lauren Williams, who now runs Capital B, who's just brilliant and incredibly dynamic and just really a powerhouse in journalism and has been so supportive of everything I want to do throughout the years. Brent Staples at the New York Times, he's on the editorial board, was such an incredible source of advice and inspiration. I had just seen so much and has so many stories after having been a Black person in journalism for so many years. And honestly, I get so much support too, just from people on Twitter, people on Instagram, people who don't know me, but for some reason are encouraging and supportive and complimentary. And that really means so much to me.
All right, I'm going to have you complete these 3 statements for me.
Oh boy. Okay. Okay.
Better humans are.
Empathetic.
How do you know when you're empathetic?
I think there's a mental leap that happens where you actually put yourself in the other person's mind and body and see things through their eyes. And sometimes your opinion can kind of soften.
Better work is.
Enjoyable if you can find it.
And a better world has.
More people who read.
Ooh, I love that. Jenee, thank you so much for being here. I love that we were able to feature you. I'll tell everyone, of course, to go read Dear Prudence and maybe even write to you.
Please do.
And yeah, just appreciate being able to see you out there being excellent at what you do and being a Black woman that's guiding us all who have dreams to become whatever it is we're going to become excellent in. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
That was Jenee Desmond-Harris, writer and podcast host for the Dear Prudence column. I loved her. You can check out more of her work by reading her column or listening to her show. One big thing before we go. Often when I ask people who are just getting started in their career or who are making a big change what they want, it's intimidating. What do you want is a big question. I think a better one that Jenee illustrated so well is, what don't you want? Jenee had 2 moments where it was so clear to her what she didn't want. And sometimes that's a simpler place to recreate a vision for yourself. When you know what you don't want, you can figure out what you do want. If you like this conversation, share it with the first person who comes to mind. And give us a rating before you go to help other people like you find the show. Additionally, we'd love to hear what you liked about this episode or our show in general. So take a minute to write a 1-sentence review so that we can see it and thank you for it. If you're not subscribed to my newsletter, make sure you sign up. You'll get weekly research-backed practices for elevating your mindset and living more meaningfully right into your inbox. Go to linkedin.com/everydaybetter. That's linkedin.com/everydaybetter. Everyday Better is a production of LinkedIn News. The show is produced by Alexis Ramdow. Asaf Gijron is our sound engineer. He makes sure we sound good in the studio. John Partham mixed our show. Enrique Montalvo is the executive producer of LinkedIn Editorial Productions. Dave Pond is head of news production. Courtney Koop is head of LinkedIn Original Audio and Video. Dan Roth is the editor-in-chief of LinkedIn. And I'm Leah Smart. Thanks for coming with me, and I'll see you next week.